I want to ask you a simple question, which is, would you speak to your friend in the way that you speak to yourself after a poor night of sleep? Would they actually feel safe with you? And the answer here is probably not. And in today's video, which is all about self-kindness and compassion, I'm going to be diving into the fourth layer of insomnia recovery and why this is the piece that holds everything together. If you're new to my channel, my name is Fiona. I am a recovered chronic insomniac turned holistic sleep coach. I help other people recover from insomnia naturally. And in today's video, I'm going to deep dive the fourth layer of insomnia recovery, which is actually part of a 4-part series, which I do encourage you to watch from the beginning, as it will give this fourth video so much more context as to why self-kindness and compassion is the fourth element and perhaps even the most important when it comes to piecing all of this information, knowledge, and principles together. In our last video, we talked all about the importance of becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable. And this is where self-kindness and compassion truly comes into the mix. Because as we learned, it isn't so much about sleeplessness, but it's how we react to that sleeplessness to begin with. And if you have been in the cycle of insomnia, you've been doing a bit of your research, you probably also know that perfectionists and high achievers do have a predisposition to have insomnia because they are the type of people who are, or must I say, we are the type of people that like to have control over situations. We are the kind of people that if a specific situation arises, we simply go in and fix it. And the reason that we have almost ended up in this cycle that is perpetuated based on our reactions, is because this is the first situation that we just do not know how to fix. And in a way, that creates quite a lot of discomfort and also negative self-talk. As perfectionists, we tend to have certain expectations on ourselves as to how we'd like to perform. We have certain expectations as to how life needs to be carried out, around how sleep needs to happen. We're probably quite strict with ourselves. We're quite disciplined. We definitely have like these set rules and expectations for how we'd like to show up in life. And when sleep is something that cannot be achieved, then that of course becomes something that is very uncomfortable for us to deal with, because we are not used to not having control over every single situation. Which is where, of course, our last video where we spoke about becoming very comfortable with being uncomfortable is important. But part of that also entails us rewiring and rewriting the dialogue of how we react to our experiences in relation to how we see ourselves in the world. To that, it is also important to know that harsh self-talk actually creates more hyper-arousal. The more we actually feed into being broken, to something that cannot be fixed, to again, I guess, this cycle that we're stuck in, the more we're actually feeding our nervous system with small little clues and cues that it is in fact in a position of threat. And this whole experience of learning to be comfortable with that discomfort is actually learning to change that dialogue in relation to that experience. So you are, instead of saying that you are broken, you are in fact actually learning that that thought and that emotion can be there, but that in fact is not an emotion that needs to be changed, and that you are not broken because you aren't actually something that needs fixing, that your baseline, your state of being isn't one that needs to be changed, improved, or altered on a continuous basis. Actually, where kindness actually creates safety. So this element of surrender and surrendering to the process, which will allow you to find peaceful and restful sleep, knowing that sleep happens when your body is feeling safe and is in a state of complete calm and acceptance, truly comes from allowing yourself that element of self-kindness. That allows you to truly like embody the experience that even though you are feeling uncomfortable, that you are in fact safe. Oftentimes for me now, even if I've had, I don't know, I feel like I maybe have just a lot going on and I'm about to fall asleep, and oftentimes like I still get this thought of like, oh, what if I don't sleep? But the difference now is that I truly have embodied the reality that I am safe, and that isn't a thought that I need to engage in. In fact, I can allow that thought to be there. I don't need to have a dialogue with that thought. And in fact, the opposite is actually true. I know that I am safe. I know that my body is something that is capable of showing me and allowing me to sleep naturally, and that isn't something that I need to go in and fix and change or have a dialogue to kind of disprove. This element of kindness truly ties into the embodiment of insomnia recovery as a whole. It comes down to like the micro level of how we speak to ourselves on a day-to-day basis, knowing that our thoughts can be there. We don't need to have a dialogue with them, but we can slowly start to rewire that dialogue or that kind of thought process to a place where we're simply a little bit kinder and more compassionate to ourselves. And the reason this ties into kind of like the bigger picture is because we oftentimes want to rush recovery, and we want to almost like fix it in a specific time frame. We almost like Google, how do I make myself sleep tonight? But the bigger picture is that you are learning such a bigger lesson here. You are given the tools and the emotional resilience tools that will also be carried out throughout so many other elements of life. And insomnia, in a way, maybe wants to teach you these lessons in a way where other difficult situations haven't been able to. As a high achiever, you most likely have tackled every other difficult situation head on. However, insomnia is a situation and a difficulty that is tackled in such a different way, and it is teaching you a completely different lesson as opposed to perhaps other hardships that you have had to experience before. And truly, compassion really is a skill. It is not a feeling. It is something we need to practice. All of these things that we have spoken about in these four different layers are building blocks that we need to repetitively implement in order to come out stronger on the other side. Self-compassion isn't something that you can simply wake up and say, okay, today I'm going to be kind to myself. It is identifying when those negative thoughts come up and how you can slowly start to decide whether or not you want to abide them or kind of struggle with them, or actually rewrite that narrative in a way that is actually more constructive to the kind of person that you want to show up as. And sometimes I feel like it's also so difficult to actually acknowledge, okay, how do I actually identify whether or not I'm not being kind or compassionate to myself? And to that, I would also say, like, maybe you can spend 5 minutes just thinking about how you react to the situations around insomnia that make you feel broken in some kind of way. How are you speaking to yourself? Like, are you almost like saying that you're broken? Like, why is this happening to you? Why can't you fix it? Why can't you perform in a certain way? Why can't you show up as like your best self for other people? And all of those are probably elements and ways that that you're speaking and relating to yourself in a way that are quite harsh. And you can identify whether or not they are or are not harsh in a way where, like, maybe even think about, would you say these kinds of things to someone who you deeply cared about? And that is probably something that you would not do. Most likely, you would never speak to others the way that you speak to yourself. And again, I'm not going to ask you to simply change the way you speak to yourself from one day to the other, but it really is a practice of slowly identifying day to day when these difficult situations do arise. How are you actually speaking to yourself in that situation? And how can you maybe offer yourself 1% more kindness and grace to allow yourself to simply be in that situation and honestly, truly be human? I think oftentimes we have such high expectations of like how we need to show up in the world, and that is actually not really helping us. Like we fail to acknowledge the fact that we are also human, that we're also allowed to be sad at times, that we don't always have to show up in a specific way. And maybe a little bit of self-compassion and kindness will also allow you to see the humanity that also lives inside of yourself. Okay, how does this look like on a day-to-day basis? So again, speaking about last video where we definitely identified that this discomfort around sleep and sleeplessness comes up quite often. And all of these experiences where we're learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable also are experiences and situations where we can practice self-kindness and compassion. So in the morning, if we have woken up and we have had a really poor night of sleep, this is an excellent opportunity where you can almost like set the expectations of how you want to show up for yourself in that day. For me, oftentimes I would almost like try and plow through and almost like fake it till you make it. And as much as that's sometimes like helpful in a way of like befriending wakefulness, I think I would also like force myself into feeling a specific way, thinking that befriending wakefulness is almost something that I needed to do, and it's actually something I needed to experience. So it's almost like learning that you don't need to set yourself up with unrealistic expectations when you do not feel your best. I learned that it was okay for me to be tired for this portion of my life. Like I knew that insomnia was not going to last forever. And I know that as much as it's uncomfortable in that present moment, it's honestly a blip and a small little moment in time in comparison to like the whole experience that is your life. And when we set up also all of these expectations as to how we want to show up for ourselves on that day, we also should almost like expect or set ourselves up for failure, because we're expecting the outcome of our day to be very specific. Like we need to be at the top of our game, we need to be emotionally fine, we need to be happy. And the more we almost like push those expectations of how we need to feel on ourselves, honestly, the less likely we're actually going to experience them. Happiness and joy and comfort and also peace are almost like byproducts of simply allowing life to run through us, as opposed to us forcing life to look a specific way. So in the morning, if you have specific expectations as to how you would like life or that day to go, maybe just begin by asking yourself like where those expectations actually come from, and whether or not you can actually slowly start tweaking the dialogue to one where you can simply allow yourself to be a little bit more human, allow yourself a little bit more grace, and know that yes, you're allowed to feel uncomfortable and still go about your day and you'll still be fine. And then throughout the day, when you feel a little bit tired or you feel irritable or you feel emotional, honestly, allow yourself to be those things. Like I used to always think of myself as someone who is very joyful and happy and like in touch with my emotions. And when insomnia came into my life, I felt so emotionally distraught all the time. And I used to think that I needed to almost like push those feelings away. I'm also a yoga teacher. I almost used to think like, how can I teach other people to relax? And I don't know how to relax myself. And throughout the day, that actually meant that if I needed to cry, that I just needed to cry. That if I needed 5 minutes to step out of a meeting, or if I needed 5 minutes with like a loved one, like I just learned that it was okay for me to just not be okay for that given moment of time. And actually, I started realizing that when I simply allow these emotions and these like waves of emotions to run through me, I don't almost like drown in the emotion and in the discomfort that is this constraint that I have set for myself, because I am fully embodying the experience. And I would actually feel like I'd experience way more joy and happiness if I also allowed those negative and like kind of sad times to run through me. And then at night, when I was dreading the nighttime, I think this is where this specific idea around perfectionism and control definitely comes into play. I needed to question my desire to control every single situation in my sleeping environment. I used to feel like I needed like a completely dark room and complete silence and all of this list of rules in order for sleep to happen. And I really spent some time, and I did the deep work in knowing that all of these elements of control simply came from a reaction for me to almost like feel like I was like in some way perfect, or that I had control over a specific outcome. And enough experience had also built up by then for me to actually realize that I didn't have any control over sleep. Like I think that this element of control comes when you feel like you don't have control over maybe other elements, so you need to control your sleep environment because sleep is nowhere to be found. And I slowly just started like challenging that idea, and I started simply like allowing myself like the what if I didn't have control over those situations. And then in the middle of the night, when I also couldn't sleep, or I'd feel like I was battling with sleep, I'd get up out of bed. Honestly, I think oftentimes I hear my clients also say, like, I had a panic attack, or I had an anxiety attack. And actually, those anxiety attacks and those panic attacks come from the resistance of truly experiencing that emotion. And it comes from that negative self-talk of like not being able to feel a specific way. And many times, like, again, this kindness and allowing yourself to be human simply allows that emotion to run through you, and know that you're going to be okay on the other side. Anyway, I know that that was so much information, and again, I don't want to at all discredit that insomnia is at all comfortable. I know that it truly isn't, but just know that you're not alone. If you have specific questions as to how implementing these elements of self-kindness and compassion work for you, then feel free to just like leave me a note below, and I promise to get back to you. You can always reach out to me also privately on sleep_coaching with Fiona on Instagram, and I will also get back to you with a personalized reply that is specific to you and your situation. If you would simply like to have email updates, I also share a weekly newsletter, and you can go ahead and sign up for that below. Anyway, I hope you liked this video. And again, if you haven't already, please check out the first 3 videos of this series. And I can guarantee that all of these elements tied in together are going to give you so much so much clarity as to how you can actually take insomnia recovery into your own hands.